Lovely. A little bit here. Okay. A warm welcome to those attending and also to our viewers watching live on the Council's YouTube channel, Hillingdon, London. This is a meeting of the Pensions Committee. My name is Councillor Reeta Chamdal and I'm chair of this meeting. Details of this business to be considered today are shown on the agenda, copies of which are accessible on YouTube underneath the broadcast. Please note that members of the committee will be using tablets, laptops to view the agenda items today. Fire alarm. We're not expecting a fire alarm drill today, so if the fire alarm does go off, please follow the officers to the fire exits and out of the building to the designated meeting points. Mobile devices. For those in the room, please switch off any mobile devices before the meeting starts or put them on silent. Declarations of interest. Councillors, if you have any declaration of interest to make in relation to today's agenda, please ensure that you state it whether it is pecuniary or non-pecuniary and give the reason for your interest. Members need not declare any interest in any item on the agenda where they have already listed this on the register of interests. Furthermore, you do not need to declare any interest just because you're a ward councillor or because you're a governor. Resident feedback forms. For those watching via YouTube, if you are so minded, you can complete one of our resident feedback forms. These can be found in the information section underneath the YouTube video. These forms are intended to help us improve the way that we run our meetings. We will now move on to attendees of this meeting. If we could all introduce ourselves, because we've had a change in some of the committee members, starting from my right.
Councillor Kaushik Banerjee, Vice Chair.
Councillor Keith Burrows. Councillor Stuart Mathers. Councillor Tony Burrows.
Tim and Paul Fort, London Civ.
Good evening, Jenny Buck, the Chief Investment Officer for London Civ.
Andrew Singh from ISIO Investment Advisory.
Sonny Jeter, also from ISIO.
Roger Hackett, Chair of the Pensions Board.
Tony Next, Pension Board.
Marion George, Independent Advisor.
Carl Pereira, Trainee Pension Fund Accountant.
Pete Carpenter, Director of Treasury, Pensions and Statutory Accounts for the last 2 months.
Lovely.
Anisha Teji, Democratic Services.
Thank you. A warm welcome to Councillor Keith Burrows, new to the committee. A warm welcome to Tim and Jenny from London Civ. Okay, so agenda item 1. Apologies for absence.
No apologies.
Do we have any declarations of interest in matters coming before this meeting? Okay. So approve the minutes of the meeting the 26th of March 2025 and then the 8th of May 2025. All agreed? Agreed. Confirm that items marked Part 1 will be considered in public and those marked Part 2 will be considered in private. So, Part 1, Members, Public and Press, the Administration Report.
Thank you, and there's apologies from Hampshire County Council who couldn't attend tonight due to a clash of times. This report updates the Pensions Committee on pensions administration activities and performance delivered by the Hampshire Pension Service on behalf of Hillingdon Pension Fund, and the summary in the report sets out really the key indications: 100% service delivery against performance targets, data quality scores increasing by 3% from 89% in 23 to 92% in 24, 99.38% of active benefit statements, 100% of deferred benefit statements produced and published within statutory deadlines, just over 50% of all members registered with the portal. Low numbers of complaints in comparison to total membership. The historic leavers backlog, which Hampshire took over when they started the service, is now down to 275 from just under 4,000. Regular project meetings and weekly monitoring of progress against McLeod. Online development of the online services continuing, and again, there's a lot of work going on there to get ready for the July and October deadlines. And significant work being undertaken to monitor and improve cybersecurity, and there's an interesting section in the report which talks about their internal audit requirements and what they're doing to make sure they're safe and make sure our data is safe going forward. Hampshire have also, as an attachment, achieved a re-accreditation of a Customer Service Excellence Award with 8 compliant pluses where expectations were exceeded. The benchmarking exercise shows they are, as a service, the second best administrator amongst peers, with a high service, low cost provider. Happy to answer some general questions on it. Again, I've seen this presentation once from before. The service is moving along well. but it's really, really important to have this solid backlog or backlog to what happens with administration, given all the other things that are going to happen over the next 9 months in terms of the triennial evaluation and changes to all of the things that are going to happen. So happy to take questions.
Any questions? Councillor Mathers.
Thank you, Chair. Just a small on the historic leavers. I know that Hampshire are no longer going to charge for any ongoing work, which is very good of them. I just wondered if there is any more that needs to be done through the fund with employers to ensure that those final 275 employees, historic leavers, are have the information that we need, etc., to progress things, and what's maybe being done to resolve this in a timely manner.
Thank you. We are working with them to see what we can do. Can I add it to something else? I think another worrying thing for me is, as if you like, the responsible officer from the council side, that we've only got 50% signed up for the portal, and the easiest way to get information is electronically. And so one of the drives we'll be looking at with them is to see how we can get that number up more quickly, and that will help those other issues as well, because one of the most difficult things is actually getting hold of people half the time. If we've got an electronic fingerprint of them where we can talk to them properly, it speeds everything up, and so that's got to be crucial going forward.
I just forgot, Pete, you weren't at the last meeting. It's your first meeting, isn't it? Oh, so a warm welcome to Pete Carpenter, Director of our Pensions. Apologies for missing that one out. I think first of all we need to acknowledge the Service Excellence report that we've got from Hampshire, so they are doing a grand service for us. I've got one question for you, Pete. So, and it relates to what Councillor Mathers has said as well. Have they got systems in place then to look at the reduction in number in members and the fact that they haven't got enough people on the portal?
I think part of the problem is, and if you go back years, we've always had problems as well as pension funds in getting the people overseas. The important thing is for us to be proactive with the admitted bodies as well, to try and get them to help us to get this information, because it is difficult. You know, we could have people who are trying to access a portal that might not have worked for 30 years in some cases, and so it's difficult in terms of doing that, but anything we can work with admitted bodies and all the other people in the scheme to do to help Hampshire do this is better, both for us and for Hampshire, because that's the most difficult thing now.
Councillor Bales.
Thank you, Chair. It's reassuring about the cyber security that they seem quite robust in their testing, and I think we should encourage them to continue to be robust in light of all the recent stuff with Marks and Spencer's and the Co-op and the stuff I heard on the news today. So if you could thank them but encourage them to be as resilient as ever. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, so the Pensions Committee note the administration update. Have we agreed? Agreed. Right, moving swiftly on to agenda item 6, investment strategy and fund manager performance. Again, over to you, Pete.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just give a brief introduction and pass over to Tim. Obviously, the report sets out, and this is things we can discuss in public, not in private, both funding and liability position at the end of the first quarter. The high level is funding level remains unchanged at 128%, but remember that 128% is the position after 20 years. And, I just have to re-emphasise that, and that's what we do. Liabilities have decreased slightly over the quarter, as have pension assets in terms of their value, but we have returned a return in the quarter which is slightly below benchmark, but it's been better than it has in previous quarters. But I think I'll now let Tim explain that in more detail.
Yes, thank you, Pete, and good evening, everybody, and thank you for having us today this afternoon. So before I sort of get into it, I think a lot of the highlights have sort of been summarized by Pete on that. We actually do have a presentation that we've prepared for you this evening, because I think one of the areas where the underperformance has been focused on is on the global equities. So, Chair, if it's okay, what I would suggest is when we get to the private part, we address each of those funds in detail, and we've got the presentation ready for you, if that's okay.
Any questions? No? So, just recommendation that the committee note the funding and performance update? Agreed? Agreed. Lovely. Okay. Agenda item 7, responsible investment update. Again, over to you, Pete.
Thank you, Chair. This is a really important and topical report. Obviously, we're seeing a lot of activation or active challenging of pension funds at the moment. I hope it establishes for all stakeholders that fund managers are entrusted with invested pension fund assets, are implementing their ESG policies and demonstrate their commitment to ensuring it's a cognizant part of their investment process. Environmental, social and governance refers to the 3 central factors in measuring sustainability and societal impact of investment in the company or business. These criteria help to determine the future financial performance of companies' return and risk. In addition, report details progress on the UK Stewardship Code project, policy updates and other relevant information. Fund managers carry out proxy voting on behalf of our Hillingdon Pension Fund. The breakdown on voting statistics is on the table on page 64, and that's quite important. In the period, there's been 15,000 resolutions that have been voted on. LGIM have voted against proposed management resolutions on 23% of occasions, supporting resolutions on 73%. The London Civ backed resolutions on just under 81% and against on 14%. LGIM and the Civ were not voting on 5% and 3% respectively of those funds where they weren't at those meetings. So I think hopefully it shows in overall terms that we do take it very seriously. We have an ESG policy, we try to implement it, and our fund managers are proactive in actually looking at things. Report also sets out in the second half how managers are engaging in proactively on behalf of us, and you've got examples from LGIM on Rio Tinto and Public and how that's happening, and from LA PFF on Persimmon, Burberry and Kering and the London Stock Exchange Group. It just gives you examples of how we're trying to proactively move those things forward in the report. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Any questions from the committee? No. Councillor Mathers, this is your area of expertise with lab. Any questions, or you quite happy?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, if I just may reflect. So the Rio Tinto stuff has been happening with LAF and LGIM for some time now, and it's really encouraging to see that with mining companies particularly, that the standards of safety, environmental and workers and human rights are being pushed forward. I think pension funds have played quite a pivotal role in that. The story that I've been seeing, particularly over the last 3 years, in how the investors have been saying the standards need to rise. We don't want the liability, but also actually the standards are getting there slowly. So it's important, and I'm pleased to see that LGIM are promoting that as one of their case studies. My question is always going to be, voting against something doesn't necessarily mean it's something in line with our values, and I know there's all the details in the shared drive, but it would be really helpful to get a sense of, in a small table if possible, and not too much of a burden on officer time, just a small table so it's saying on the type of issues that have been voted against, so we can see whether they're environmental or governance, or because they could just be remuneration where someone's not performed, and that's not particularly always the thing that we want to be standing for. We have a values policy around, kind of making sure that our footprint on the earth and on people and other things is not too heavy. So it would be useful if that could be provided. I understand that might take a lot of work, so I'll leave that to officers to judge whether that's helpful.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, we'll talk to the funds to see how we can deliver that in any sort of way.
Any other questions? Okay, so it's recommended that the Pensions Committee note the fund manager's ESG activities and compliance efforts, and we note the LCIV and LAP activities. We all agreed? Agreed.
Thank you, Chair. Purpose of the report is to identify Pension Committee the main risks with the pension fund and enable them to monitor and review risk going forward. The Council's risk management software, JCAD, permits all 14 risks, we've got 7 and 7, to be classified into open and closed. Software allows risks that are being managed day-to-day business to be taken off and managed in proper ways. In the event that risk requires active management, it can be easily reintroduced. These are constantly monitored and reviewed every 3 months to ensure statuses are aligned with the risk management profiles. We have, as I've said, 7 closed risks, 7 open risks. The report proposes that risk PEN 10, liquidity on member dealings, is downgraded and closed. We are managing this on a daily basis and in reality haven't had to draw on funds to do this sort of thing now for 7 years, and so it is really now part of day-to-day. I'd like to close though in terms of my little introduction on this to say, although this is what the risks are today, and when we get onto the governance report, we've got quite a tumultuous 9 months ahead of us in terms of revaluations, changes to funding statements, investment statements, preparing for transfer of everything to the CIV, different arrangements for management of and provision of financial advice to the fund. And so I think we will see a number of different types of risk on here. One, just to mention, we have our administration, as we've just seen, provided by Hampshire. They've got local government review. We don't know what's going to happen to Hampshire in terms of how that advice is going to be provided 2 years' time when Hampshire is reorganised. So there's a lot of things happening in this sphere over the next couple of years, which is going to be really important to manage properly. And I would suggest when we get to the September and December meetings in particular, we might have a very different set of risks on than we do now. Happy to take questions, Chair.
Any questions?
Thank you, Chair. I just have one around PEN 9, which is the liquidity of assets. We've had some movement recently, particularly in property, etc. And I think the fear was, have we got enough liquidity in order to move strategies around? And obviously we're coming up to a period where we're reviewing strategy. I know investments don't happen overnight, but I'm quite keen to make sure or to understand a little bit more of the story and your assessment on risk as to whether we might come across any hurdles in changing strategy or changing approaches because of the liquidity of our assets.
Thank you, Chair. We're in the infancy of where we're going to start to change, but in terms of a lot of our property in particular, that they're being run down and changed at the moment, so that is giving small amounts of available cash. I think our bigger issue will be what we decide to do in future meetings in terms of our overall strategy and our funding allocations, which might require significantly more money than that, and that's where we'll probably have to have the discussions up front to say what we're going to do 6 months down the road, because the fund's performance will differ from what it's been in the last 4 to 6 years going forward, and that will take money to actually, and decisions will need to be made to actually move things. So I think it is something quite important, and we can build up something for you, Councillor, to say this is what we've got at the moment, this is how we see it moving forward as part of that decision-making process.
Any further questions? Yeah. Okay, so if I start with Andrew from...
It's not questions, just a comment. So I think at the point of the last strategic asset allocation review, so a couple of years back now, we discussed the point around liquidity, and broad rule of thumb we agreed was kind of 25 to 30% in a liquid type assets we'd be comfortable with. Anything past that it is possible, but then it might limit flexibility of the strategy. And I think I've just scanned down the page in the LC report, then it's at low 20%, so feels comfortable from that point of view.
Roger.
Thank you, Chair. Just to build on what Councillor Burles was saying, one of the things we're going to be doing at the next Pensions Board meeting is talking to the officers about the issue of cyber security. About 2 years ago, we had a major exercise where we mapped the cyber area, and we went through that to look at how well our partners were doing in terms of cyber security, because as you all know, the amount of cyber security actually that the council takes up is a fairly small amount. Hampshire are quite good at telling us about their penetration tests, but we'd like to know a little bit more about them. So take it into account the workload that there is, but take it into account what's happened recently, as Councillor Burles mentioned. We will be having a chat with the officers as to whether or not we can actually do that exercise again, because it is due to be done. At the moment it's not on the work programme because of the staffing issues and the workload, but it's something we'd like to look at again, because we've done a lot of the work, we've done the mapping, it's updating where people are, where our partners are. So just to say, you know, we will be looking into what you were talking about, I hope.
Thank you, Roger. Actually, that's reassuring from one perspective, that we are just looking, although it's not due now, we're just making sure we are okay in light of everything that's happening elsewhere.
I'd like to add a bit of context to that, but I would need to do it in the private part.
Mine was just a comment on generally around liquidity and the future. When we do the strategy review in the autumn, we do need to think about income to pay pensions, and again this may come up in part 2 when we talk about the consultation response from the government that's just come out. Again, we'll need to think about risk and how we define income requirements to the CIV, because they're going to be in control of implementation, etc. in the future. So that is, it's worth just flagging that now for the future.
Thank you. Any further questions? No? Okay. So, I think generally, just this coming off what Pete said, I think we're happy that we're covering all the risks at the moment as a committee, bearing in mind that, as Pete said, there will be a change come September moving forward. So based on that, the Pensions Committee, is it recommended that we consider and agree the risk register in terms of the approach as it is now, the specific risks identified and the measures being taken to mitigate those risks, note the format agreeing the retired risk nurse which remain open, approve closure of Pen 10, liquidity on members' dealings, risks that the fund is unable to settle member payments. Are we agreed? Yes, agreed. Okay. Agenda item 9, governance part 1. Over to you again, Pete.
Thank you, Chair. This one will be a little bit longer than my past 2 because there's a number of items in here that's very important. Report enables the Pensions Committee to review the committee's work plan, note governance updates, as well as the approval of various triennial and interim policy updates. We've already said, but I can't underestimate, and we're going to have a massive workload in the next 9 months in terms of what we need to do with all the transfers going on. You know, we've got 3 meetings before the possible transfers, or when the transfers will happen. You know, and as well as what we need to do, we've got policy statements that might need to be changed slightly. You know, we won't have to do everything, but there's a lot that we're going to have to do. So it's going to be significant, the pensions legislation, and you'll get a good presentation in a minute from our London Civ colleagues. But that only came out on Thursday, the final version. I'm sure it'll be tweaked again as it goes through Parliament. You know, that's going to be massive. From a governance point of view, you know, as sitting as a member of a London Civ, we do know that other Civs in the south of the United Kingdom are not in a place where the London Civ is, and so there is a lot of uncertainty around that as well. The Pensions Committee work plan has been updated and is shown as in an appendix to the report. The policies that are listed in the report have been rescheduled, but I think as we go forward we might well be doing a lot of rescheduling of things and moving things around for the December and March meetings to make sure that members have got adequate time to actually look at things properly, because there's going to be some key things coming up that we have to make the right decisions on. The committee are asked to review this work plan and make suggestions for consideration and inclusion. In terms of the competencies, another of the agenda items is ensuring that members are doing the requisite training for this committee. And it's really important we do that to make sure that we have a compliant committee in terms of what it does and how it knows and how it makes those decisions. We've said before in this meeting tonight there's going to be a lot of important decisions coming up over the next 9 months, and we just need to make sure that our members have the right background and knowledge to make sure that you understand what those decisions are and the implications of them. The local government pension scheme requires us as scheme employers and administration authorities to formulate, publish and keep under review respective discretionary policies. Discretions are further split into mandatory and non-mandatory discretions. The Hillingdon Pension Fund has a fund-specific discretion policy which is updated and reviewed every 3 years, and this was last reviewed in 22. A revised pension-relevant discretion and the policy is presented for approval and publication in this meeting. There have been no changes in regulations underpinning the policy since the last review, hence no changes to the actual policy itself. However, one of the responsible officer titles for the implementation of some of the policies has changed from Head of Treasury and Pensions and Statutory Accounts to Director, Pensions, Treasury and Statutory Accounts, and it's been amended accordingly, and that's highlighted in yellow in the reports. The General Code of Practice is set to become effective from September 25, and we are currently slightly behind schedule to become compliant with the code. The main compliance policy outstanding is cyber policy, which we've just talked about. The last pension board, the board acknowledged the personal limitations experienced by officers over the past few months and agreed to move a compliance timetable around to ensure everything is completed by March when we do all the timetable changes in terms of movements to the CIV and everything else. We need to make sure we're compliant by that stage. As noted, most local government pension schemes in the country are actually struggling with this themselves as well. And we probably will be towards the front, potentially, of the compliant people in the delivery of this moving forward. A revised Code of Practice action plan is attached and has been produced to align with the proposed compliance timetable of March 26. Thank you. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Okay, I've just got just a few around our training. I think we get like a quarterly or a monthly update from London Civ as well, which everybody's welcome to attend. So if you are attending it, can you please let Tunde or Pete know that you're attending it, because it all goes towards your own personal development. We just need to, if we make a note of this, Pete, to get the training modules out for Councillor Burrows and you, and that's about 14 hours work of training, you'd be pleased to know. I'm not going to go through individual records there, but if you have completed some training and it hasn't been updated on the risk register, please do let us know. And moving forward, I think with the changes with the pension strategy as well, there may be more regulatory requirements that we are required to do as a pensions committee. So this is just a small piece that we're doing, but it could get a bit more intense as we move forward. Okay. So just for the
Marion.
Oh, Marion, sorry.
I didn't know whether you wanted me to comment on that. The consultation response that came out last week made it clear that pensions committee training and skills will be brought onto an equivalent mandatory standard as pension boards. And what surprised me anyway is that it's actually going to be as an individual requirement, not as levels across the board. In the past it's always been for the whole board and the whole committee. It's now going to be individually, and then there's also within the proposals it's that the training policies are going to have to be updated to say how it's going to be delivered, but also what sanctions councils will apply for people who don't meet the requirements. So it will be more onerous in future. Although I don't know anything about the NHS, so maybe this is small beer.
Thank you, Marion, because that will also, I think, make it. And council would have to look forward as well. So if we have any substitutes, they would have to be trained as well. So that's something that we would have to look through with the council to say, right, any substitutes, they need to be fully trained before we can actually say you can substitute for a meeting. Thank you, Marion, that's noted. So, is the committee happy to note the date for the pensions committee meetings, note the committee work plan, which I think probably will be subject to change depending what's coming up in the next few months, note the committee continues professional development update, approve the revised discretion policy 3rd of June 2025, and note the GCOP update. Agreed? Agreed.